yesterday, Rick Knight, had a letter published in the Chicago News Tribune this morning. So, all
right, good morning, everybody. Day 2. Thank you for being here. We're going to start this morning in this session together. And we're going to talk about, the work that we're doing together. It is really hard. It's hard to try to bring everyone together who cares about solving climate change. We are ultimately working to create a coalition of climate activists as diverse as our country, divided on many issues, different in many ways, but united on the need for climate solutions. We know from ecology that a diverse ecosystem is stronger than a monoculture. And sociological studies confirm that human groups that are diverse and more creative are better at problem solving and better at decision making. So we aim to become a strong and diverse community and organization. But we know that this is not easy. So we wanted to offer this session this morning to help us think about how we can create a harmonious and diverse community. So in a few minutes, we're going to ask you to divide into groups of 3 to begin sharing stories of belonging and stories of not belonging. But first, we're going to share some stories with you.
So we might look like 2 well-educated Midwestern white people to you, with much more in common than any differences that we might have. But I'm from Ohio.
And I'm from Michigan.
And did you know that in 1835, Michigan and Ohio went to war? This is a true story. They were fighting over the thriving port city of Toledo. Eventually, the 2 sides came to a negotiated settlement. Ohio got Toledo, and Michigan got what we call the Upper Peninsula, which you might know is connected by land to Wisconsin. So when Ohio and Michigan went to war, the big loser was Wisconsin. Anyway, here we are, not quite 200 years after this bitter conflict, and we have managed to put aside our differences. Even though Ohio State University and the University of Michigan continue to play out the bitter rivalry between our 2 states. Okay, I want to tell you a couple of stories of belonging and not belonging. So, when I was in graduate school, getting my master's in social work, I took a class on the psychology of women, and I was the only man in the class. And the first day of class was spent debating whether I should be allowed to remain in the class or not. Many of the women said they did not feel safe with a man in the room. I had a few friends in the class who stuck up for me, and they said, well, John is not like other men. That made me feel a little strange. Later, after I was allowed to stay, I was sometimes asked, John, what do men think about this? This was also kind of weird. So I had been defined as both not really a man and also a representative of all men. So I did not feel like I belonged in that group. And every time class ended, my classmates would go to the elevator bank. We were on the 11th floor of a building, and I would run to the stairwell and run down 11 flights of stairs to get away from all of them. Well, that's one experience. I also remember the first time I went to a CCL national conference. 2017, I was the only one from my chapter. I was a new volunteer. And so I got there and knew nobody. And on lobby day, my last lobby meeting of the day, I had been assigned to be the meeting lead because I was an experienced lobbyist at that point. It's my 4th lobby meeting. I think Elizabeth assigned that meeting lead status to me. And it was with my member of Congress, and the meeting went very badly. In fact, one of our volunteers in the meeting blurted out, does the congressman even care about the environment? And, as the meeting lead, I wanted to crawl under the table. So I left that meeting and the end of lobby day feeling kind of crushed and, just disappointed and like a failure, really. And I happened to ride home on the train with this 19-year-old intern who was working for Madeline Para. And, you know, I told her how bummed out I was, and she gave me this pep talk. She was younger than my kids. And she gave me this pep talk all the way back on the train to the hotel. And I'm like, who are you, actually? And she said, well, I intern for Madeline Para, and she's so positive, and it just kind of rubs off on you after a while. So I was getting Madeline's influence secondhand. Anyway, so this lifted my spirits. But then I got to the reception, and even though I had met a few people in the course of those 3 days, when I got to the reception, I did not see a single person that I knew. So I felt really alone. And I was just sitting there by myself and still like processing the day and feeling kind of left out. And somebody saw me there sitting alone, and they came over and introduced themselves and just started chatting with me. And I was drawn back into the community of CCL. And of course, now when I go to Washington for these conferences, I have friends from all over the country, and I have a really deep sense of belonging. So there's a couple of stories of not belonging and finding my way to a place of belonging.
So my story is about not always feeling like I belonged with a certain part of my family. My mom is a twin, and her sister, they grew up in Lansing, Michigan, and her sister after college graduated and moved to the East Coast and met somebody there and got married, and they lived in Connecticut. And we were really close to this part of the family because this was where we would spend our vacations. My mom was a single parent, and that's what we could afford to do, but it was a wonderful place to go and visit. And I have a lot of fond memories of doing that. And yet, as welcome as I felt there, I didn't always feel like I belonged. My cousin one of my cousins is a year older than me, and we were best friends and pen pals. But there were some differences. They were exposed to a lot more cultural things than I was. And they were into the arts, and my uncle and my cousin are singers, and they play instruments, and they knew about lots of music that wasn't familiar to me, and art, and you know, things like that, where I sometimes felt a little left out. And then there would be times where they would kind of tease us about calling soft drinks pop instead of soda, and would make comments about our Midwestern accents and the way we might say certain things. And I'm sure all of it was done in a way that they, you know, it's not that they were really making fun of us. I think they thought it was endearing, perhaps. But as a young person, in my young mind, I often felt like I didn't quite belong there. Now, many years later, for many years, I haven't felt that way. I feel much more like I belong, and I continue to be very close to this part of my family. But that gives you an idea of the idea that sometimes as welcoming as people can be, it doesn't always lead to a sense of belonging. So we're going to spend some time giving you the opportunity to get to know some other people here this morning and explore what belonging means to you and how we can foster a sense of belonging in CCL. So we have some questions that we're gonna have 3 sets of questions for you, and you're gonna do this in groups of 3. So you'll have 10 minutes for this first round, and I guess I have the clicker here. So we're gonna ask you to introduce yourselves, to find out a little bit like what do you have in common. Find some things that you share in common. Try to find some things that are different about you. And then also talk a little bit about what is the value that maybe most drives your interest in climate change, whether it's, you know, care for creation or fairness or responsibility. So just make sure that you give everybody an opportunity to speak and to really listen to each other, and wait to jump in until it's your turn. So go ahead and begin, and we'll check back in a little bit. We'll let you know when there's 5 minutes left.
And we'll give you a minute just to get into your groups of 3.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started on the next group of questions. And I have a quick announcement first while people are wrapping up. On this table, this first table over here, there is a container with climate voter buttons that you are invited to take with you. One of the McHenry County chapter volunteers donated buttons, so please help yourself. Okay, next we're gonna think a little bit about belonging. So, want you to consider a time you felt you didn't belong, and also a time when you felt that you didn't belong and then someone welcomed you into the group or the situation and you did develop a sense of belonging. Or maybe you were welcomed and you didn't quite get that sense of belonging, but just kind of think about that and share with each other about that.
Okay, folks, we're going to go to our final set of questions. We'd like you to talk a little bit about belonging in CCL in particular. So 3 questions for you to think about. How much do you feel welcomed or have a sense of belonging in CCL? Or even at the conference itself, what reasons might people have for not feeling like they belong in CCL? And finally, what could you do, or what could CCL do, to ensure people do feel welcome and to help create a sense of belonging for others in CCL? Now, we left a piece of paper, I think, on all of the tables, because when you talk about what CCL could do, we would love it if someone in your group would take notes. And if anyone needs a piece of paper, some of these tables have 2 groups of 3, and we're happy to bring you more paper if you need it. Just raise your hand, we'll bring you more paper. But if you would take notes on that part of your conversation, we'd appreciate it. And then we're going to do full group sharing after this. So have fun with these 3 questions. You can raise your hand if you have something you'd like to share about what you've been talking about. And take care to only share, your own personal story or share, thoughts in general about CCL and belonging, but not share other people's stories, maybe where they didn't feel they belonged, where they might not feel comfortable. Go ahead, and if anybody wants to share something, please go ahead and raise your hand. John, Tucson.
Yeah, we thought it'd be a good idea to involve the local community and college to our events. Like we're here in Rockville College, and it'd be nice if we had a poster up or somehow got the message out to Rockville students and professors that they could attend our event here.
Just so you know, we did reach out, and we worked with a professor who was here yesterday. I don't think Brian is here this morning, but and he really encouraged his students to attend. We offered free registration, but it's nevertheless a good idea. I just want you to know that we did do that.
And by the way, those of you who took notes, if you would just leave them on your tables or make sure they get to me and Elizabeth when you're done, we'd love to see that.
Okay, one of the things we talked about was lessening the cost and the time commitment of many of our younger people that, you know, are doing things like going to school and things. And one way of instead of going to the national lobby days, having more local congressman, senator off lobbying there that people can get to quicker and at much less cost.
Thank you, Mike. Someone else?
Madeline here had a great idea that Chris and I liked about designating a person in each meeting. Perhaps it's someone who's not new, but maybe not like a 10-year veteran either, who can listen in and pretend like I'm a brand new person. So if someone says something, like I said MOC, they can interject and be like, what's MOC? And they can kind of speak on behalf of this new person so they don't have to do that themselves if they don't want to, and because they might recognize when we're using too much jargon, maybe when someone mentions a bill and it should be briefly explained.
I'm going to say this before someone else does, so then we can't say it. But all three of us said, for number 3, that our chapters weren't that good at getting new people connected to work to do in our chapters. And I think for us particularly, we have 3 co-leaders, and we're used to doing so many things each. We need to better link up new people and have them really belong by being, having them feel belonging by doing something.
Yeah, that's a great something to share about connecting to other people in your chapter who have similar interests. And for those of you who were not at Jay Edgar's session yesterday about welcoming new members, the slides will be available in the email that we send out, and it was terrific, and it really just highlighted that message in particular. So, and we'll definitely continue finding ways to highlight the great work that Jay is doing as an example, so that, because he definitely wants other people to learn from what he has learned. Thank you.
For me, it's about welcoming it comes with welcoming, but working to elevate the sort of thoughts and wishes and interests of new members that join, especially when they come from new perspectives, and working to support those perspectives to see what they would like to see, so long as it aligns with the values in CCL. That's a way that we can continue to build out the different ways that we invite new people in to do things, right? So if we're accepting new perspectives from people, we are also doing things a little bit differently in a way that might continue to get people with new perspectives into the chapter, which I think is really important for visibility and for belonging, which is what we're all talking about. It can be hard to find belonging when all of the people that you see when you join an organization are of a particular age, race, gender, like all of the different metrics politics, all the different metrics that we think about diversity. And obviously it's important only to do that for people who are enthusiastic about wanting to do new things if they're new members, right? We don't want to force people into elevating someone's thoughts and ideas who doesn't necessarily want to be elevated, wants to chill back a little bit. But I see that as a really important way that we can increase inclusivity and belonging, and eventually also hopefully make the leadership of a collective leadership of chapters around the country to be a little bit more diverse if we start elevating the thoughts and interests of new members from new perspectives.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Mike. Let's see.
I think maybe that's
We've-
all the time we have.
Mark, if you have something really brief to share, okay.
Okay.
That'll be the last one.
You have 60 seconds or less.
Oh gosh, I'm so nervous. No, so a lot of groups have said that they have lots of members who don't do anything, right? So you got 200 members, but you have 7 members that do stuff. So we talked about, Mike talked about having like a group that specifically just does the monthly activity, the writing. And so we thought about what we could call them. We want to call them minute. This just takes minutes, so we don't want to call them minute men, minute women. So the working title is Minute Minions.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Thanks, everybody, very much for talking to each other, learning from each other, and sharing something with us. We'll come around and pick up those papers. Right now, we have a 25-minute break. Rick Knight is going to be presenting here about the Energy Permitting Reform Act, and then we have an introduction to Braver Angels and Grass Tops engagement sessions in the classroom building. And so those start at 10:10. Is that right? Okay.